officers to do the field training officer program because they're basically they've had a lot. They've done a lot over their careers, and they leave that up to other officers. We have a few senior officers that still do that, and she was one of them.
And did you continue to be the chief of Brooklyn Center Police Department up until April of this year?
I was promoted to the chief position in September of 2015, and I served in that position until April of this year.
Yeah, and what happened in April of this year?
Officer Potter, or Kim Potter, was involved in the shooting incident, and the aftermath of that related to the political pressures within the city. I was no longer allowed to stay as the chief of police.
And was that because you would not terminate her until she had a due process hearing? Objection made.
The objection is overruled on that ground. You may answer.
I believe one of the reasons that I was required or requested to leave the agency was because I would not immediately fire Kim Potter.
Did Kim Potter leave voluntarily after that? Quit her job?
She did resign her position to me while I was still the chief.
Okay. Let's go to April 11th of this year. You were still chief at that time?
I was.
And that was the day that a critical incident happened, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you weren't at the critical incident at any time, were you?
I was off duty at the time.
And however, you did look at BWC body-worn cameras afterwards, is that correct?
I did.
The objection is overruled.
I'm trying to lead you into that, sir. Did you observe body-worn cameras after the incident?
Yes, I did.
And what body-worn cameras, if any, did you observe?
So on the night of the incident, I had been called in, and I was at the police station, triaging the situation, working through the incident. I was advised by a BCA agent to take a look at the body-worn camera footage from Kim Potter's camera, and that's what I did.
Later on, at some time later, did you look at more body-worn camera?
I looked at one other camera angle much later, and that was the squad cameras. So within the police department, our officers carry and have on their person a body-worn camera, but also early on in the process, we had mounted squad cameras that can watch and can monitor outside of the car directly.
So you're able to see inside the car before the stop, is that right?
Yes.
And you saw the stop, and you saw the arrest, and you saw the aftermath, correct?
I did.
And after viewing all of those incidents and the body-worn cameras, did you see anything based on your knowledge and experience inside the car that her conduct was consistent with her training at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
When I viewed both camera angles and had all the data in front of me, I saw no violation.
No violation of what?
Of policy, procedure, or law.
And the policy and procedure at Brooklyn Center Police Department, to your knowledge, since you're the chief, followed the law of use of force, is that right?
Yes, it does.
Now, in a critical incident, there are shooting, sometimes violence, chaos. In your experience, going back your years of being a law enforcement officer, had you in the past, before April 11th, been involved in critical incidents?
Yes, I have.
Was there one that stands up in your mind as memorable?
Yes.
Was that a critical incident where you were almost dragged in a car, or you were actually dragged for a while?
That is correct.
Trying to get to the issue, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled. You may answer, or I'll let the answer stand. Officer, could you please remember to pause a little bit stop talking when there's an objection, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
The objection was overruled, so you can answer my question.
I was involved in a situation where I was dragged by a car.
And what went through your mind when you were dragged by that car?
Sheer terror, trying to recall my training, what I had been exposed to before that, and simply trying to survive.
That one incident, after you were dragged by that car, I take it you lived, but did you remember the aftermath of that? What happened immediately after you were dragged?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
We need
It
to
goes to her
sidebar.
testimony, Your Honor.
Counsel, we need to sidebar.
Okay.
What is up, everyone? How was your lunch break? Sorry we were a little bit late. My live feed was behind a little bit and I didn't realize it from pausing when a commercial came up before we cut the last live when we were doing the Pledge of Allegiance. I paused it and unpaused it and I didn't realize it didn't catch up. So I was sitting here waiting for the judge to come back and really they had already brought on another witness. So my apologies for that technical error. Norman, you're hungover. What is today? It's Thursday. Yeah, Wednesday nights happen. It happens. It's a thing. Proud ankle, you had a bologna sandwich? I just laid down. I don't feel that great. I was going to go get beer, but I don't know. I don't feel that great. I probably should stop drinking like 6 or 7 Monsters in a day. That'd probably help. TH, you just got the YouTube notification. Well, at least you got it. Most people don't even get it.
Okay. The objection is sustained on relevance.
Now let's back up to what you viewed in the body-worn camera and the squad camera. You viewed that after Officer Lucky stopped, my hair is all messed up because of that thing. I'm told that Officer Lucky, he stopped the vehicle. He was the trainee at the time, is that right?
Yes.
And did you notice anything about his procedure in doing that was an error?
Yes.
What was that?
I think when he made the decision to make a custodial arrest, I think at that time when he got Mr. Wright out of the vehicle, what training tells us to do is to move him to the rear of the car, away from the open door, or close the door behind him.
Okay.
That would be something that you would learn later that you would do as a procedural issue as far as a
And an
traffic arrest.
FTO, unless it was some type of an emergency situation, would not interfere at the time he was performing the arrest to correct that. Is that a fair statement?
Objection, leave it.
I'll let you answer. You may answer.
As a field training officer, I would not have corrected that action until afterwards during a debrief.
After Mr. Wright was asked to come out of the car and he was being handcuffed, he broke away, correct?
Yes, it appeared that way on the video.
Anything about what Officer Lucky did, or Officer Potter did, or in fact what Sergeant Johnson did and the chaos that happened after that, any violation of policy that you saw in that?
I did not.
In your opinion, could a taser be used to stop him from fleeing?
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for a legal conclusion.
The objection is overruled. You may answer.
Could a taser be used in that situation?
A taser could have been used in that situation.
And also, as a result of the Officer Johnson being partway in the car and Officer Lucky standing by the other side of the car and both car doors open, they could have been seriously injured if the car would have went in reverse. Is that right?
Yes,
And that would be a great bodily harm. Is that correct?
correct.
So, is it your opinion that not only could a taser be used in this chaotic situation, but also a gun? Is that right?
That is correct.
And that's based on your viewing of the videos, correct?
Yes.
And your experience. How many years are you experienced as a law enforcement officer?
Just about 27 years.
And you know you're under oath.
Yes, I am.
And you're not doing any favors for Miss Potter, are you?
Objection made.
Well, are you doing any favors for her by saying this?
I am not.
And that's your opinion based on your experience as a law enforcement officer
Yes.
and an ex-chief. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Are you presently employed?
I am.
And what is your job?
I'm a business agent for Law Enforcement Labor Services, or LELS.
And law enforcement labor services negotiates contracts with various police departments,
Yes.
and you negotiate contracts.
I've just started doing that, yes.
Okay, and you have no more connection with being a law enforcement officer. Is that right?
Correct.
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
You may cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Gannon.
Oh.
Thank you for coming in. Your entire law enforcement career, well, I was going to say it was at Brooklyn Center, but you also worked as a military police officer in the Marines, correct?
Correct.
But outside of the Marines, it was entirely with Brooklyn Center, correct?
Yes, sir.
And a total of 27 years on that job.
Just about 27 years, yes, sir.
And it's a difficult job, isn't it?
Yes,
Rewarding job,
certainly.
but it's a dangerous job sometimes, correct?
Yes,
And when you're out there, you have to rely on the other officers around you to help keep you safe,
yes,
and you have to rely on other officers, well, other officers rely on you to keep them safe.
correct.
Common to back up other officers on even just traffic stops.
Yes,
And it builds sort of a camaraderie, doesn't it, among officers?
yes, it does.
And
Your water's over here. My water. I didn't mean to interrupt you. You know that. This is my mask. I lost my mask.
not my day to keep track of.
I need a new mask.
COVID has affected us in many ways, hasn't it? Sorry about the interruption. And Kim Potter became a part of that camaraderie aspect of your life, your professional life.
Yes,
And did you know her personally at all, in personal context?
yes.
And what kinds of stuff did you do outside of work?
Social gatherings, friends getting together, different anniversaries, things that would come up, but there'd be time to time that we would get together on a personal basis with her family.
So also kind of personal friends.
Yes,
And you actually did work shifts with her?
yes, we did.
And that matter that she did for well, I call it the honor guard, but I think you had a different term for it, the Lima maybe?
I'm sorry?
Okay, I've been referring to it as the honor guard. Is that the same thing that you were talking about?
Yes, honor guard is, I guess, a subset of Lima. Yeah.
And that's really an important support service for law enforcement families, isn't it?
I'd agree with that.
You really admired her for doing that.
I did.
And when she was working for the DART program, she was no longer really out on the street every day doing patrol, right?
No, that's incorrect.
Okay, tell me.
So the DART team was basically an offshoot of the patrol. So basically, you'd still be in patrol operations and be a patrol officer, but you would make time in your shift to go back and do the follow-up with the survivor and make sure that they have the services. So they do both duties.
Got it, thank you. And then on April 11th of this year, when you learned about this incident, you learned about it that night, correct?
Basically, early in the afternoon, yes.
Okay. And at some point, did you learn that it was Miss Potter who had fired a gun and caused the death of that young man?
Yes.
Did that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
And at that point that evening, you watched her body cam video, correct?
Yes, I did.
And I was a little unclear. You said at some point you watched the squad camera, sometime after that, but I wasn't sure about when after that you also watched the dashboard cam.
Within the last 2 to 3 weeks, I've watched the dash cam. I have not had access to that camera footage other than the initial camera that I saw, which was her body cam after I resigned.
And so at the time, on April 11th, you only watched that dashboard, or I'm sorry, Officer Potter's body cam.
Correct.
And at the time, when you watched that, you concluded that she did not mean to fire her firearm.
Correct.
And you decided that night to release the video to the public, to show the public that.
Yes, I did.
And it's your understanding that because you refused to fire her, you were not going to be allowed to stay as the chief of police.
I believe there were multiple situations or reasons that I was given. That was one of them. I believe the other reason was my handling of the riots that occurred that night and the next night in front of the police department. Those were things that were pointed out to me that that was in conflict with the elected body.
And you disagreed with those reasons,
Yes, I did.
and particularly with what the shall we say, suggestion to fire her, the request to fire her.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And that's because you thought she should be entitled to some due process, right, before she were to be fired.
We have a policy in place to do administrative investigations, and they entail being thorough, being impartial, and being fair. And I don't think I could have done any one of those three things if I were to make that decision that day.
And so you essentially felt that you were being forced out of the job.
Correct.
And but instead you resigned, right?
Resigned in lieu of termination.
And were allowed then to keep all the benefits, that retirement benefits that come with the job.
Correct.
Now you work for the agency, the Law Enforcement Legal Services, that also provides legal services to officers for on-duty incidents.
Yes, I was unemployed for about 6 months, and I've just recently been employed.
Your agency, well, I shouldn't call it that, should I? Where you previously worked at Brooklyn Center, had a policy about officer-involved shooting incidents.
Correct.
And the policy required that the investigation of that kind of incident be referred to an outside agency.
Yes.
And that day even, April 11th, you made the decision to authorize the BCA to do the investigation.
Correct.
And the purpose of that is to avoid any potential bias in the investigation, correct?
That is the intent.
It's also to provide some transparency so that people see that that bias is not going to play, the potential bias is going to play a part in the decision, correct?
Correct.
But today you think you have none of that bias in order to offer the opinions that Mr. Gray asked you to offer.
With the video evidence that I've seen today, or within the last 6 months, I believe I can make that decision.
You did an interview with the media on November 14th of 2021. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And that was really about the aspect of how you had lost your job there at Brooklyn Center.
It was about the inner workings of working with the political ramifications of decision making. Yes.
And in that interview, you refused to discuss the actual killing of Mr. Wright because you thought you might be a witness in the case.
Correct.
What made you think on November 14th that you might be a witness in the case?
I had the belief that either the prosecution or the defense would call me as a witness in some capacity. I was a police chief.
And had the defense contacted you at that point?
I believe at that point they had contacted me.
So at that point in time when you were contacted by the defense, you had only reviewed Ms. Potter's body-worn camera, correct?
Correct.
And so the only aspect of the case that you had at the time was from Ms. Potter's body-worn camera, correct?
Yes.
And at that time, you did not see any danger for the other officers that would have justified the use of deadly force, as you've said today.
I did see some danger on the driver's side in case the vehicle went in reverse, but I did not see the situation of Michael Johnson on the other side of the car.
So you've been involved in a lot of traffic stops, I assume?
Yes, sir.
Have you had some people flee from you at a traffic stop?
Yes, I have.
Did any of them drive in reverse to the squad car when they fled from you?
No, they have not.
Does it make any sense for somebody to put it in reverse when there are two squad cars behind them to flee?
No.
Prior to that media interview, you had actually had sat down and talked with the defense attorneys on November 8th, correct?
Yes.
And in that interview at that time, you were of the opinion that Sergeant Johnson was leaning into the passenger side of the car when Mr. Wright tried to drive away, correct?
Correct.
So that's something you felt you knew at that time to offer an opinion on, correct?
I need to stand corrected because I have to remember exactly when I saw the video that was reflected on the squad camera. Once I saw the squad camera angle, I believe that Mr. Johnson was hanging inside the car at the time of the incident.
Well, hanging inside the car was not the word you used in the interview with the defense attorneys, is it?
I don't recall.
Would it help to refresh your recollection if I showed it to you?
Yes.
All right. May I approach her?
Yes, you may.
Yes.
Can I assume that- Where's the quote? That's not a quote, that's a report. Honorably, Your Honor, that wasn't a quote. It was a report.
Okay, counsel, member, no speaking objections. Oh, my God.
That's what I apologize.
All right.
This one,
Is there an objection?
may we be heard on?
Yes.
The judge has had enough. It's Tired dealing with their shit. Bickering and nitpicking over nothing. Is it true you got a black belt on? Well, yes it is. Well, that's not currently the same belt you had on the interview 300 months ago, is it? I don't recall. Objection. Okay. That's the whole case. The whole case is like this. I wonder if Kim Potter is going to testify today. I don't know. I think they got 5 witnesses. I think that's what they were talking about yesterday. And they've done 2 today. And these are all character witnesses, which is why they don't really provide any real information to the case. They're just talking about their opinions and their resumes. They're just character reference. Yeah, Jeb, she don't even sound mad.
Objection is
She
sustained.
sounds overstimulated.
At the time of the interview in November 8th of 2021, you believed is simply that Mr. Johnson, Sergeant Johnson, I'm sorry, was leaning into the car, correct?
Was in the car, yes, and leaning in the car.
All right. And the second time then you met with defense counsel was December 6th of this year, correct?
Correct.
So after the trial had begun.
Yes.
And you were then, from them, shown these other videos, correct?
The 2 videos,
Yeah, I think earlier you referenced the dash camera from Officer Lecky's squad. And then what else did you reveal?
the body-worn camera footage from Officer Potter at the time.
Right. But that you watched day one, right?
Yes.
And then, so the only other video you've watched since then has been Officer Lucky's dash camera.
Correct.
Okay. And that is what you did when you met with counsel on December 6th.
Yes.
So it was only upon looking at that that you've arrived at this opinion about deadly force.
Correct.
Have you watched Sergeant Johnson's body cam?
I have not.
Have you interviewed any of the witnesses?
I have not.
Have you ever in your career offered an opinion on whether an officer's conduct was reasonable for a use of force evaluation?
I have reviewed, for IAs as a police chief, I've had to review a lot of internal affairs investigations, and I've had to make determinations based on the evidence that was presented to me.
And in making that determination, what you're determining, you're determining whether their conduct was consistent with what you said today, right? The policies and practices of the department.
Of the department, yes.
Because an officer could be disciplined by the department.
Correct.
You were not, in those situations, making a legal determination about the reasonable use of force.
I was not.
And your opinion today is solely that Officer Potter's conduct at the time was consistent with policies and practices of your department.
Correct. I'll make sure I got my numbers right. You became a commander in 2005, correct? 2005.
And a commander position is one that is largely administrative?
Yes, it's a variety of roles, but yes, administrative.
In the office, day hours.
Correct.
And have you carried a taser every day on your job since 2005?
I have not.
You have offered that Mr. Wright should not have been allowed to leave the scene, correct?
Correct.
And that's because there was a warrant for his arrest.
Correct.
And would officers, well, it's true, isn't it, that in making that arrest, officers still have to use reasonable force?
Correct.
You're not saying that anytime somebody tries to get in their vehicle and drive off during an arrest, an officer can shoot them?
That is correct. Not every time somebody gets in their car is an officer have the ability to shoot them. No.
From the dashboard camera, you were still able to determine that Sergeant Johnson's feet were planted on the ground during the incident, correct?
I believe he was still grounded, but a large portion of his body was inside the car.
But that's from the perspective of the dashboard camera.
That is correct.
Did not watch Sergeant Johnson's body-worn camera to get his first-person perspective, did you?
I have not.
Did you, well, so then you also don't know whether Sergeant Johnson was able to prevent Mr. Wright from driving off by holding onto the shift knob.
I am not aware of that.
And you also do not know that Sergeant Johnson was able to prevent, whether Sergeant Johnson was able to prevent Mr. Wright from driving off by grabbing a hold of his right arm and pulling it towards the passenger door.
I
There's
do.
object to that in the statement of testimony.
All right, members of the jury, you rely on your own memory as to what the evidence showed. Okay? You may continue.
Before deploying a taser, officers should consider the surroundings of the person they intend to tase, correct?
Correct.
As the police chief, as a fellow police officer, you would not want an officer shooting their taser in the direction of other officers or civilians.
Correct.
And in the space, well, strike that. So then you would agree, wouldn't you, that Officer Potter's decision to try to use a taser put the passenger of the vehicle and Officer Johnson at risk of being struck by the taser?
I would not agree with that.
Why not?
At that distance that she was within Mr. Wright, the prongs and the distance that they travel apart is very concise and very close. So I think her target that she was looking at doing would have been center mass at the chest and area. I don't think those prongs would have had enough time because they have to travel farther to get the distance apart. So I don't think that was in any way a danger to the passenger or to Michael Johnson because the prongs would have been very close to a tight group.
In watching Officer Potter's body-worn camera, you saw that Mr. Wright was moving around a bit as he was trying to leave.
Correct.
So it was a moving target.
Correct.
I object to that, as argument too, and also the statement of what the body camera showed.
All right. Again, members of the jury, rely on your own memory, okay?
Incidentally, are you certified to carry a taser?
I am certified to carry a taser.
So you go through the training every year as well.
I do.
And you understand the need to get a good probe spread to get a good neuromuscular incapacitation.
If at all possible, yes.
And that the more distance you have, the better off, the more likely you are to get that.
Correct.
You're familiar with the type of taser cartridges that your department started using with the Taser 7 this year?
I'm somewhat familiar with it. I did go through the taser qualification, but I've not handled them since I resigned. It's been quite a while, and we did intro them into the department this year.
Your Honor, I'd like to put Exhibit 246 on the stand, please.
You may.
246.
246.
Do you see that in front of you then?
Yes.
Sometimes I know we get kind of a glare on that screen if you need to move it. Do you recognize what this is?
Yes.
And this is Ms. Potter's certification for the Taser 7 transition, correct?
Yes.
Below the 4 check marks in blue, there are 2 boxes and one has an X in it, correct?
Yes.
And so this is indicating that, at least for this certification, the close quarters cartridge had not been used?
Correct.
When you saw the video from Ms. Potter's body cam, she was quite upset, correct?
Yes, she was.
Did you feel bad for her at the time?
I did.
Still feel bad for her?
I do.
So the manner in which Officer Lucky brought Mr. Wright out in the car, you thought it would have been better for Officer Lucky to bring him back behind the car, correct?
One thing I hate to do as a police chief is Monday morning quarterback somebody's actions, but I do stand by what I said. It would have been preferable for him to move him back away from that open door frame, but again, I'm looking at it from a perspective many months later.
But not concerning enough for you to believe that an FTO at the time should have corrected that right at the time.
No, from what I watched, it looked as if Mr. Wright was going to cooperate. He initially got out of the vehicle, and sometimes that does put officers off, and they think that there's going to be a compliant individual, and then things change very drastically and quickly. I think it would have been a coaching moment for Kim Potter to have with her probationary after the call.
You testified that a taser could have been used in that situation, and you agreed with that.
Yes.
And that situation is basically what you saw on the dash cam and her body-worn camera.
Correct.
So when you offer the jury this opinion about using your taser was consistent with policy and practice in Brooklyn Center, it's because you believe that Mr. Wright was not in control of his vehicle when he was shot, so it was an acceptable decision to use the taser.
From the video images I saw, he was not in control of his vehicle at the time that she would be deploying the taser, if that's what the tool that she used.
And that's what you said, is that he wasn't, and you didn't see him in control of the vehicle, so it would be okay for her to use the taser.
Yes.
Because if he was in control of the vehicle, it would not have been a good idea to use the taser, correct?
Correct.
Because he could have been incapacitated and the vehicle could have moved.
Yes.
If he was not in control of the motor vehicle at that time, as you believe, then there also was at that same time no threat of harm to Sergeant Johnson, correct?
Oh, I disagree with that.
Is it consistent with policy and practice for an officer, a police officer, to not know they have their gun in their hand when they shoot somebody?
Could you rephrase the question or repeat it, please?
Sure. Is it consistent, in your opinion, with policy and practice for an officer to not know they have their firearm in their hand when they shoot it?
You are correct.
I'm sorry?
You are correct.
I have nothing further, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is there redirect, Mr. Gray?
Ex-police chief Gannon,
Yes, sir.
would you lie under oath to help a friend out?
Sir, there's a reason why I'm an ex-chief. Nobody gets me to say something or do something that I don't believe in. I wouldn't lie for anyone.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Just briefly, Your Honor. You're offering today your opinions.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor.
Is there any further redirect? No? Is there any further redirect? Okay. Thank you. Let me step down.
Got a courtroom full of deaf people. They're all screaming at each other and arguing over stuff that don't matter. It's like big stinking kids.
Okay, the defense may call its next witness.
You call Colleen.
Well, just to make things more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. So we have this funny thing we say around here. Sucking D makes you deaf.
Okay.
Keep that in mind when they say they can't hear each other. It makes the trial a little bit more entertaining.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify?
I do.
Please have a seat. Remove your mask, please, and state your full name and spell it.
Colleen, Colleen. Michael, Mychal. Fricky, Fricke.
The court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. Please answer with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head. And don't say uh-huh and uh-uh. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question's finished before you answer. If you don't understand a question, let the lawyer know. And finally, if an objection is made, please stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to.
Okay.
Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Fricky, you're employed by which police department?
The City of Brooklyn Park Police Department,
How long have you been employed there?
since May of 2021.
How old are you?
40 years old.
A little slower.
40 years old.
Okay. Give us your educational background, please.
I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and public administration and a master's degree in criminal justice.
What institutions did you graduate from?
St. Cloud State University.
For both.
Correct.
Were you formerly employed with another police department before your current employment?
I was previously employed with the Brooklyn Center Police Department
When did you start there?
in March of 2008.
What were your initial roles and duties there?
I was hired as a patrol officer.
And did you stay in that capacity throughout your work there?
I had different assignments. I filled a role as a juvenile officer for a few years. I was a sergeant for 3 years.
While you worked there, did you come to know former Officer Potter?
I did.
How did you come to know her?
We worked on the same shift together for several years.
Did she become for you a mentor and friend?
Yes.
And did you spend quite a bit of time with her?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a chance to observe her working in the community?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a chance to observe her with suspects of crime, for example?
Yes,
Did you find her to be patient?
I did.
Polite?
Objection, Your Honor. Prior court ruling.
Yes, counsel, the objection is sustained.
Was she a, I'm sorry about that, was she a good police officer?
Yes, she was.
Was she an FTO?
Yes.
Did you work on the DART program with her?
I did.
What is DART again?
It's a domestic abuse response team.
What was your role in that?
I led the team, supervised the team.
And what did you do with respect to Officer Potter in terms of the DART team?
She was a member of the team, so I would assign cases to her and follow up with her to, check in on the work that she was doing with the victims and families.
And you supervised her work, did you not?
Yes.
Were you aware of whether or not during your employment at Brooklyn Center that Officer Potter had fired her weapon?
No.
Were you aware that she had ever fired a taser?
No.
As a matter of policy, are you familiar with the policies of Brooklyn Center Police Department?
Yes.
As a matter of policy, would an officer be allowed to ignore a bench warrant for a gun charge and let an individual leave the scene instead of making an arrest?
No, that wouldn't be typical.
You would have to make the arrest.
Yes.
You were summoned to the scene on April 11th, were you not?
I was.
And you were assigned to Officer Potter to be with her, am I right about that?
Yes.
And stayed with her from the scene and into the Brooklyn Park Police Department, is that right?
Brooklyn Center Police
Brooklyn
Department.
Center, I'm sorry. I know there is a distinction. Did you have a chance to observe Officer Potter while she was at the Brooklyn Center Police Department in a room by herself?
I did.
What did you observe in that regard?
I saw her curled up in the corner of the room.
What room was she in?
She was. It was a meeting room. I don't know a name for it.
Was she by herself,
Yes.
crying?
Yes.
In all the years of working with her in Brooklyn Center, do you have an opinion as to her reputation for peacefulness?
Yeah, I think she's a remarkable.
Objection, Your Honor. Prior court ruling.
Well, excuse me, I'll let you finish your answer.
I think she was a remarkable police officer because she was a remarkable person. And
Okay, the objection is sustained at that
I
point.
wanted to ask you.
The jury will disregard that last statement, okay?
I wanted to ask you to focus on her reputation for being peaceful in the community. Do you have an opinion as to whether or not she has a reputation for being peaceful?
yeah, I think she has a positive reputation.
Okay. And do you have do you have an opinion as to her reputation in the community for being law-abiding?
Yeah.
What's your opinion?
That she is law-abiding.
I have no further questions.
Is there any cross?
Officer Fricky, you began your law enforcement career in 2008,
Correct.
and you remained with Brooklyn Center through April of 2021.
Through May of 2021.
May.
Yes.
Okay. And during your entire career, the defendant was a coworker up until obviously April 11th.
Correct.
And you worked alongside her as a patrol officer,
Correct.
shift after shift, year after year.
Not from the day I was hired until the day I left there.
Okay. In addition to those years, though, that you did work with patrol and in the DART program, you developed a relationship with her beyond a professional relationship.
Yes.
You talked on the phone.
Yes.
You texted with each other.
Yes.
You got together a few times a year outside of work.
Yes.
You were friends.
Yes.
Right. You'd say that you and the defendant communicated a lot during your career, both inside and outside of work.
Primarily inside of work, yes.
Yep. And you were contacted by the defense to provide a statement on November 8th of this year?
Yes.
Okay. And you've talked to the defendant herself on the phone after this incident multiple times, correct?
I wouldn't say multiple.
Do you remember saying multiple times back on November 5th of 2021?
I don't remember the verbiage that I used then.
Okay. Now, I do want to talk about your actions on April 11th. On that day, you were working a patrol shift, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. That's the same shift that Officer Potter was working at that day?
Correct.
And as part of your duties, you paid attention to the radio communications?
Correct.
And around 2 p.m., you knew that Officer Potter and Officer Lucky had initiated a traffic stop, correct?
Yes.
And you were at the police station at that time.
Correct.
You heard a further report about a crash and then a report of shots fired, correct?
Correct.
And you drove to the scene?
Yes.
And you knew that a shots fired call is perhaps the most serious call you can respond to as a police officer, correct?
It's serious.
Yep. But even at that time, you did not know who was shot, why they were shot, where they were shot.
Correct.
But nonetheless, use of a firearm could seriously injure and kill someone, correct?
The objection is sustained.
I'd like to talk to you about the response that you had to the scene, which was discussed on direct examination.
Also be honest.
Sidebar, Your Honor.
I've noticed that the more sidebars and objections that happen, the more they throw them papers down at the desk. Sound like they're throwing shit. The witness here is somewhere between the age of 25 and 55. It depends which part of her you're looking at. I cannot determine her age at all. Back to reality, you think the judge sounds like a game show host? For one of them weird erotic game shows they have in China. She says she was 40. I was right. I mean, yeah, I was in there. I was right. That's right in that 20-year gap I provided. That's what she said. What's up, cheeky chaps? Sam, I don't know anything about that trial. I'll have to look into it. All right, David, I'll check it out. Nah, Cheeky Chaps, Nightbot and Thoughtbot, they're not hooligans because they don't have a heart.
Still sustained.
Eventually, Officer Fricky, you did function on November 11th as Officer Potter's escort officer. Am I correct?
On April 11th, yes.
You encountered her at the scene and then you went back to the police station with her.
Yes.
You arrived with her at the same time?
Yes.
Do you recall when you walked into the police station, Officer Potter walking away from you?
Yes, she was walking in front of me.
And then she entered a conference room and closed the door.
I don't recall if she closed the door before I got in there behind her.
Sure, but you were actually only outside of her presence for several seconds and then you entered the room, correct?
I don't recall the sequence.
Okay. How long did you leave her alone as her escort officer on November 11th?
I wouldn't say I left her alone.
Okay, so she was just on the other side of the doorway and you walked in just as you entered the police station, correct?
The room that she went into, the entire front of the room is glass. So if I was on the outside of that room, I would have still been able to see her.
Yeah. In other words, she wasn't in the room alone for a long period of time prior to you encountering her, correct?
Correct.
All right. And when you encountered her, you asked if you could sit with her, and she said no.
I don't recall specifically.
Do you recall when she asked you to take your body-worn camera off?
I recall a similar conversation.
Okay. And you did, at her request, take your body-worn camera off, correct?
I removed it from my clip and placed it on a table.
And then she did not want you to be her escort officer anymore, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you stopped being her escort officer. Someone else was assigned to that role?
Somebody else assisted me in that role, yes.
Okay. Now, you agree you weren't present at the scene when the defendant shot Mr. Wright?
It is beyond the scope. The objection is sustained.
Sure. You testified that the defendant had a reputation for having a law-abiding character.
Yes.
Prior to April 11th, the defendant was a law enforcement officer, correct?
Yes.
All right. In terms of following the law, though, generally speaking, you'd agree that following the law on one day does not absolve you from accountability the next day, correct?
Okay. The objection is sustained.
You testified that the defendant had a character for peacefulness.
Yes.
You'd agree that as a police officer, though, she was specifically trained in how to use force, correct?
Yes.
And the weapons that would use force, including firearms and tasers?
It is beyond the scope. The objection is sustained.
No further questions, right?
Okay. Is there a redirect? Okay. All right. You may step down.
Judge, may we have a sidebar here?
Yes.
I wonder if they're going to get through the remaining witnesses today. I'd say you take a drink every time they do a sidebar, a break, or an objection, but then you guys would be dying from alcohol poisoning. Them guys in the back are talking so close face to face. I thought they were gonna kiss. I don't understand what the mask is. It must be a fetish.
Okay, please come forward. And would you stand behind the witness chair? Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this cause? Yes. Please take the witness. Okay, please remove your mask. And would you please spell your full name, state and spell your full name?
Thomas Loren Hall, ThomasLorenHall.
All right, the court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. So only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question's finished before you answer. Answer yes or no instead of shaking your head or saying uh-huh or uh-uh. If an objection is made, stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. You can ask for clarification if you don't understand a question. Okay? Counsel?
Thank you. Mr. Hall, how old a fellow are you?
23,
And where are you from?
Champlin, Minnesota.
Where'd you go to high school?
Champlin Park.
Did you have an occasion to know Kim Potter?
Yes.
How did you meet her?
I met her actually at my neighbor's house for the first time, probably about 11 years ago.
And did you become acquainted with her children as well?
Yes.
Are you friends with them?
Yes, I am.
How much time did you spend over the last 10 years with Miss Potter, Kim Potter, former Officer Potter?
Just about every weekend.
Have you ever been in the military?
Yes, I was.
Which branch did you enroll in?
I was in the Army.
And what was your position in the Army?
I was a 25 uniform, which is a signal system support specialist.
Did you have what is called a security clearance in the Army?
Yes, I did.
What is that?
It pretty much gave me opportunity to be able to listen or tap into a lot of different things because I had a top secret security clearance, so I could be able to be briefed on different situations or scenarios that a lot of people aren't.
Were you eventually honorably discharged from the Army?
Yes, I was.
And what are you training to do right now?
I am training actually to be a diesel technician at the moment.
And when do you think you'll be done?
I will be done this upcoming August.
And you have employment lined up, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay. Well, during the time that you've spent with, I also wanted to ask you one thing. You wanted me to ask you, are you an Eagle Scout?
Yes, I am.
Okay. During the 10 years or so that you've known Officer Potter and her family, have you been able to obtain an opinion as to her reputation in the community for being law-abiding?
Yes, I have.
And what is that opinion?
Kim always looked at it as just because I'm an officer doesn't give me an opportunity to not have to abide the laws that I have to enforce. Everybody in this world is expected to obey the laws that are enforced by herself and anybody else.
Similarly, do you have an opinion based upon your 10 years or more of knowing her for her reputation in the community for being peaceful?
She has always been an extremely peaceful person, and no matter what was going on or what happened, she was always there to help you or help de-escalate the situation to make it so both sides could understand where they were coming from. And she was always willing to help you out if you had a question on something regarding a situation you were in. She was a very peaceful person.
Kind of a second mother for you.
Yes.
No further questions.
Okay, is there any cross?
Afternoon, Mr. Hall. Just to clarify, your opinion is based on her reputation in the community, and that community would be Champlin, your block, your relationships with her children. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right. Not on the streets of Brooklyn Center.
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you very much. You may step down. Does the defense have any further witnesses? Okay. Hello, sir. Would you please come forward? And stand right next to me, behind the chair, the witness chair. Raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully testify in connection with this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please sit down. Remove your mask. State your full name and spell it.
Frank, F-R-A-N-K, Roth, R-O-T-H.
All right, a couple things. The court reporter is taking down everything that's being said. Therefore, you have to answer orally instead of shaking your head or saying uh-huh and uh-uh. Don't do that. If you don't understand a question, ask for clarification. If an objection is made, you got to stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. And the final thing is, two people can't be talking at the same time, so you have to wait until the question is finished before you answer. Okay?
Very good.
All right, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Roth, I understand you've had a career in law enforcement.
Yes, sir, I have.
Would you tell us where you first worked and then the department you ended your career in?
I started as a Robbinsdale police officer in December of 1982. I worked there for a little over 8 years, and then I was employed with the City of Brooklyn Center as a police officer from January of 1991 through August of 2015.
What rank did you achieve at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
I achieved the rank of sergeant.
Do you know, in that capacity, former officer Kim Potter?
Yes, I do.
Were you her direct supervisor?
I was.
For how long?
Well, I met Kim when she first started in 2004, I believe, and I was an indirect supervisor for a number of years, and then I was her direct supervisor for approximately 10 years.
Do you have an estimate of how many hours you were her direct supervisor over those 10 years?
I do.
And what would that be?
Well, it was a normal work year is 2,080, and it was about 1,800 hours a year for 10 years, so about 18,000 hours.
And during that time, you got to know her pretty well.
I did.
You consider her a friend of yours.
I do.
Was she also involved in the DART program,
She was.
the Honor Guard,
She was a member of the Lima Honor Guard.
and the hostage negotiations team?
Yes, that's a unit that I supervised.
Volunteered for all of those?
Absolutely.
You had a chance to observe her in the community for all those 10 years and have an understanding of what her reputation is in the community.
Yes, I did. We worked very close in Brooklyn Center. We're not a big agency by any means, so quite often the sergeants integrate with the officers many, many times during the course of a day on calls, the community type relations things, community outreach. I saw Kim in all those aspects.
So you work closely with her?
very closely.
Well, I want to ask your opinion as to her reputation in the community.
I'm sorry, could you go again, please?
Given how long you worked with her, I wanted to ask you of your opinion as to her reputation in the community for being law-abiding.
It was sterling.
I wanted to also ask you, do you have a personal opinion as to whether she was law-abiding?
Yes, I do.
Same opinion?
It's the expectation that we have as being police officers. She was very good.
Do you have an opinion as to her reputation in the community for being peaceful?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Kim was extremely peaceful through through a lot of the stuff we did with the crisis negotiation, hostage negotiation unit. That was our goal, was peaceful ends to tragic situations. And given the opportunity, Kim got peaceful resolutions.
And that's your personal opinion as well?
That's my personal and trained opinion as her supervisor.
Thank you very much.
All right. Is there cross, Mr. Larson?
Mr. Roth, could you identify the year you retired? I didn't catch that.
2015.
2015. And I apologize if I said Mr. Roth. It's Sergeant Roth, correct?
You can call me Frank.
But during your career with Brooklyn Center, obviously Officer Potter was a coworker, a fellow police officer, and she worked for you.
Yes, I was her direct supervisor.
And but in addition to that, though, you became friends,
Yes,
and you've been a strong supporter of her,
I do support Kim.
and you've been a strong supporter after this incident on April 11th, 2021.
Yes,
Indeed, do you recall when the defendant sat down for an interview this fall with Star Tribune reporter Rochelle Olson, she had you right with her?
I was with her.
Yep. You were a witness to that interview.
The objection is sustained. It's beyond the scope.
She is someone that wanted you seated next to her for that interview.
It is beyond the scope.
No further questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
They're just making their way through these witnesses now.
Further witnesses. All right, sir, please come forward. Stand behind the witness chair and raise your right hand. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully respond to questions related to this?
I do.
All right, please have a seat. And would you please remove your mask?
They were just standing face to face over the clear glass, and the judge
Samuel
did not have her covering on.
Ellsworth, ELLSWORTH, Smith, SMITH, the second Roman numeral 2.
Seated in front of you is the court reporter. She's taking down everything that's being said in the courtroom. So we have to make a clear record. So answer questions with a yes or a no instead of shaking your head or saying uh-huh or uh-uh.
Yes, sir.
Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question's finished before you start answering. If an objection is made, stop talking immediately. Do not answer the question unless I tell you to. And if you don't understand a question, please ask for clarification.
Yes.
All right. Counsel?
Officer Smith, you're in uniform today?
No, I'm not. I'm civilian clothes.
Is that a tie, I thought? No?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, sorry. All right. You're originally from Burnsville, Minnesota.
Correct.
I want to ask you about your law enforcement career. Did you start out in a city south of here?
Yes, sir. I started in Kansas City, Missouri in
And
2005.
about what year was that?
2005.
What were your initial duties and obligations down in Kansas City?
Patrol.
Was it for the city or a suburb down there?
No, for the city.
How long did you work in Kansas City?
I was sworn officer from 2006 till September of 2014.
And at that time, did you decide to make a move geographically in your life?
Yes.
And where did you move to?
First, we moved to Brooklyn Center and lived there for 1 year, and then we moved to outside suburb.
Did you find employment in Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
And when did you start with the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
September 1st of 2014.
Are you there right now?
Yes.
What were your initial duties with Brooklyn Center Police?
Patrol.
In the course of your employment with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, have you come in contact with former officer Kim Potter?
Yes.
And tell us about that.
When I started there, like I said, September 1st of 14, she was working, she was patrol, and I was actually starting my field training with other officers, and just got to know her through patrol and working different shifts.
You did basic police work with her during these shifts, arrests, transport,
Yes.
talk to her, interviews, all those things?
Yes.
Okay. And during the course of the 6 years or so, a little bit more than that, that you worked for her, did you gain an opinion as to her reputation in the community?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to what her reputation in the community is for the trait of being peaceful?
She is well respected and very peaceful, and she was very professional from when I worked with her.
Is that your personal opinion as well?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion as to her reputation in the community for being law-abiding?
Yes.
What is that?
And she's very law abiding.
Is that your personal opinion?
Yes.
Why?
Because she, in my time working with her, there are times where I was maybe upset with something, and she would counsel me or coach me that, policy says this, or, basically calm me down and instruct me that this is how policy is, So she was a calming force, with a lot of new officers.
No further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Larson?
Officer Smith, you mentioned that, in your opinion, Officer Fricke has a reputation for being peaceful and law-abiding. That's the law enforcement community?
I think you meant to say Officer Potter.
Officer Potter, you mean the reputation you're discussing is the reputation she had in the law enforcement community?
Can you restate the question?
You've testified that she had a reputation for being law-abiding and peaceful in the community. You're talking about the law enforcement community.
The law enforcement community and the city of Brooklyn Center.
Okay. Now, you worked patrol with her for 7 years?
I had been employed there for 7 years.
For 7 years, and you had worked on patrol with Officer Potter.
Directly and indirectly, I worked for the first few years. I worked from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Okay.
I also worked what we refer to as power shift, 2 p.m. to 2 a.m. or 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. and early power cars from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Did you have any other professional interaction with Officer Potter?
Just working, going on calls, and helping, assisting when she was primary on calls.
Did you have any interaction with her with any other leadership roles that she had within the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
It is beyond the scope. The objection is sustained.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you. You may step down. Oh, could I get the headsets on?
They're checking out the judge's new mixtape right now.
Okay, members of the jury, we're going to stop right now. We're almost done, okay? So we're going to have, the defense will have 2 witnesses on tomorrow. So I'm going to let you go tonight, and we will start up at 9 o'clock, all right? Have a good night.
They couldn't get the 2 witnesses out today. They had 2 hours left. This judge is tired of their shiat. Tired of their bickering. Crying. Hard crying.
Okay, please be seated. Okay, Mr. Ng, you wanted to make a record.
Is that woman on the right side in the purple and yellow top Kim Potter?
Thank you, Your Honor. We would move for admission as a court exhibit the video of Colleen Fricky that you've, in your discretion, not allowed us to put it in, but I would like to, we object to your ruling, and I would like to make that a court exhibit, and I'll have Ms. Montgomery give it to your clerk. I assume without objection, just for the court's record.
Yes, we'll make it a court exhibit. Do you have a number? Okay, we do have it.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, then the second reason I wanted to take a moment of your time is that yesterday we had extensive discussions about the parameters of Rule 703, and the court ruled that we could not cross-examine Seth Stoughton on his opinion that Mr. Wright would be peacefully arrested in a short order. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the way I heard it anyway. And the court declined our effort to cross-examine him on specific instances where Mr. Wright failed to appear or would run away or escape and would be difficult to find. And at the time, I asked to leave the court to make an offer of proof so the record is complete as to what we would have asked him about had we been able to do that. And we do object to your ruling in all due respect. But I do want to make an offer of proof. The offer of proof is that Mr. Wright has repeatedly failed to appear in court, therefore he was difficult to find. There have been bench warrants for his arrest in a number of cases for failing to appear. The cases are 27 CR 19, 20 754. The next case is 27 CR 19 22959. Next case is 27 CR 19-23184. Another one is 27 CR 19-23818. Another one is 27 CR 19-24205. The primary case that we're relying on is that only a month before his death, Mr. Wright was charged with a complaint of carrying a pistol without a permit. And the incident happened on June 30th of 2020 at 16:04 hours, according to the police reports. The police responded to, I'll just quote it, responded to a person with a gun call near 51st and Bryant Avenue North, Minneapolis, Hennepin County. The caller indicated that a light-complexed 17-year-old black male wearing black shirt and shorts and white shoes was waving a black handgun. The male then got into a white Toyota Camry occupied by 4 people, with the driver wearing a red shirt. Officers located the car nearby with a person defendant herein, Dante Demetrius Wright, matching the person with the gun's description, sitting in the back seat. Once out of the vehicle, defendant took off running with officers in pursuit and managed to evade officers. Officers at the scene positively identified defendant from prior interactions. A loaded Ruger .45 caliber handgun matching the caller's description was found on the floor of the vehicle where the defendant had been sitting. Another occupant of the vehicle verified it was defendant's gun. Defendant does not have a permit to carry the firearm. This evidence would have been used in cross-examination to refute the expert's opinion that Mr. Wright would have been easily captured or found when his behavior in this instance was to run away. We have other instances of crimes of violence from him that would rebut Mr. Stoughton's thought that he was going to be peacefully arrested. He was charged, Mr. Wright was, with aggravated robbery in the first degree on December 4th, 2019. The case number is 27 CR 19-29850. That case was pending when he was stopped by Officer Lucky. And that again shows that he had a motive to flee to avoid arrest on that particular charge. The facts of that case are rather gruesome, and that is the one where he stayed overnight at a young woman's house and robbed her at gunpoint in the morning after that. This is recounted in my defendant's response to the state's memorandum in opposition to its pretrial motions. I incorporate by reference my brief, which outlines all the instances that I've referenced here. We also have instances of violence for Mr. Wright in that he's been charged in 2 civil complaints, one in 27 CV 216193, where he shot an individual in the leg and assaulted that individual's face and robbed him. And then there was another complaint where he shot someone in the head, and I believe that complaint is 27 CV 217390. And the reason we wanted this evidence in is that we needed to rebut the inference that Mr. Wright has been a peaceful individual, and that we appreciate the loss of him by his family and the loss of anybody. But the image of him as being somehow law-abiding and in all ways terrific is undercut by some of his criminal behavior. And so to give the jury a fair image of him and a picture of the facts as we know them today, we would have cross-examined that he never saw any of it, and he should have, or if he saw it, it never got in his report. So that is the offer of proof, and again, we respectfully disagree with your ruling. I'm not here to grandstand, but I do want to make the record, and I have.
Okay. And you have made the record, and I stand by my original ruling. Any bad acts by Mr. Wright that Officer Potter was aware of, I allowed in, but she was not aware of all these other matters. The issue in this case is Officer Potter's mens rea, or state of mind, when she approached Dante Wright at that stop. And logically, anything she knew about him would inform her decisions on how to approach him. These things were not within her knowledge. Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to put on the record? Oh, one other thing. I'm going to finalize the jury instructions this afternoon, and when I get them done, I'll have Zach email them to you tonight. Okay, I should probably take about an hour. I do want you to know, just so you're thinking ahead, that I believe a definition of reasonable force that incorporates the definitions that the experts have acknowledged are controlling a reasonable officer given the totality of the circumstances, something to that effect. I'll send it to you, and we can debate it tomorrow. I also want to alert you that I have thought about Mr. Ng's request for an additional instruction on authorized use of force, in addition to the authorized use of deadly force that both parties submitted. And I am going to allow an instruction to that effect because there's been so much discussion about this taser. Had the state not disputed Officer Potter's intended use of the taser, this wouldn't be a problem. But the state's expert was of the opinion that even a taser was not appropriate or reasonable under the circumstances. You know, obviously, the reasonable use of force instruction would only relate to the taser, not the gun. So it won't constitute a complete defense to the charge because here a person was killed by a gun. So I just want to alert that issue, and if anybody has any comments about that now, I can hear them, or I can hear more detailed argument after you get the draft.
Drafter.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else we need to put on the record? All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess they're wrapping it up. All right. Well, that's that. Another day at trial. Hopefully they will have this wrapped up tomorrow. Maybe on Monday they'll do closing arguments. Either way, thank you guys so much for being here and being the great hooligans that you are. We laughed. They cried. It was a good time. Really appreciate all of you. Big shout out to everyone that made donations, joined the membership program, or purchased any merch. You guys are so awesome, and I wouldn't be able to do this without you. So thank you so much for being here. I am not sure what's going on today. This is all I've had planned. We will see if there's anything going on later. I got to get some food. I haven't ate yet today because that's how I get down. But we'll see what's going on later. If nothing else, we will be gathering again tomorrow to see what's going on with the trial. Hopefully they got some better characters because so far it's been kind of rough. Either way, thank you guys so much for being here. You guys are super awesome. If you're new here, please subscribe or follow on whichever platform you are currently watching right now in order to be connected to my channel, help my channel grow, and potentially bring in new viewers to see what's happening around us. If you haven't joined the Discord, please join the Discord. The Discord is free. Download it on your phone, follow a few simple steps, and you'll be greeted with an automated message letting you know that you've done all you need to do in order to receive notifications for when and where we go live. There's also 3,700 hooligans in there for you to converse with, and we also have a news board for you to stay up to date with what's going on around the world. So please join the Discord. I will see you guys in there a little bit. I will stop in before I go get some food. So I'll see you guys there. Until the next live, stand tall, shine bright, and that's a wrap.